invite you to find a posture that's as comfortable as possible. Also supporting a sense of alertness, uprightness, making any adjustments that are needed to support the body with as much ease as possible. As we're arriving here together into this present moment, I invite you to take a few deep breaths. Bringing air into the lungs and letting it out. Letting out any holding, any tension. Invite you into check-in with your body. Gonna scan the body, bringing awareness to where there might be any tension or holding, where there might be opportunities for greater ease and relaxation. We'll make suggestions and also invite you to be checking in with yourself, with your body, in this moment, at the pace that's right for you. I invite you to start with the crown of your head, feeling into the very top point, at the top of your skull. Feeling how bringing awareness to the crown of your skull may bring with it some adjustment to the spine. There may be a sense of drawing up, bringing the crown of the head more in relation to the sky. And just noticing what's present. Sensation could be tingling, warmth or coolness. Just observing what's present and if there's any sense of tension that could be released. Inviting awareness into the head and face. If it feels supportive, you may try scrunching the face up or making a yawning lion's roar face or both. And just noticing after those motions, is there a sense of greater relaxation in the face and head? If it feels good, it may even be supportive to repeat those motions, drawing the face together, stretching it out. Maybe shaking the head a little bit. Noticing if the head settles on the neck and shoulders with a little more ease. a little more spaciousness. Moving the awareness into the neck and shoulders. I invite you to draw your shoulders up to the ears if this feels supportive, and then release them. Maybe repeating that motion if it feels supportive, and noticing if there's any tension or holding that drops away, not making anything happen, just bringing the awareness, bringing some motion if that's supportive, and noticing if there's any ease or relaxation that comes with that. Continuing to move your awareness into the chest and torso. Maybe taking a few deep breaths and releasing. Again, noticing where there may be holding, and noticing if there are opportunities for some letting go, for some ease in the body. Making any adjustments, shifting the weight, that feels like it helps bring more ease into the body. Letting your awareness move, continue downwards through the belly, hips, bringing the awareness of your weight in the chair, that feeling of contact. Just noticing if there's a feeling of settling into that contact, into a sense of support. Feeling how firmly gravity is attaching our bodies to the earth. Bringing awareness into our legs. Again, noticing what's present. Whether there's energy, sense of heaviness or lightness, sense of warmth or coolness, just noticing what's present in the legs. Letting your awareness settle downwards through the thighs, knees, calves. Inviting a sense of settling, relaxing towards the earth. Inviting any sense of ease that's available. Letting the awareness settle in the feet. Noticing what's present in the feet. Inviting any relaxation, relaxing into the support your feet are resting on, that sense of contact, connection to the earth. Inviting a sense of resting into the support of the earth. I invite you to turn your awareness to invite in the sense of the element of earth. Feeling that connection between our own bodies and the earth body. Inviting awareness of our bodies being made of the same things as the earth body. Iron, minerals. Inviting awareness of your skeletal system. Inviting a feeling of connection to the earth, being a part of earth, inseparable from earth. Extending any appreciation or gratitude that's available towards the earth element for sustaining us, supporting us. And letting that awareness go. Inviting in awareness of the element of water. Be noticing a sense of moisture in the mouth or the eyes. Bringing awareness to the sense of our blood moving through our body, sense of being made up of water, inseparable from water, connected to water. And offering any appreciation or gratitude to life-giving water for sustaining us, supporting us. And letting that awareness go. Inviting in awareness of the element of air. Noticing the coolness of the in-breath. Warmth of the out-breath. Inviting awareness of the life-giving properties of air. Being absorbed into our bodies, nourishing us, sustaining us. awareness of our inseparableness from air, being connected to air, sustained by air, made up of air. And offering any gratitude or appreciation to the element of air for supporting us, sustaining us. And letting that awareness go. Inviting in awareness of the element of fire. Maybe feeling a feeling of warmth, of a sense of the warmth our bodies are generating in this space. Sense of light filtering in through either open eyes or closed eyes. Awareness of the last bit of the sun's warmth as the day ends. Feeling the fire of movement within our bodies, the way that our inner fire facilitates movement, even as we are still micro movements within our bodies, hearts pumping, breathing, micro adjustments in our muscles, embodying the element of fire. Extending any gratitude or appreciation for the element of fire, for the presence of the sun, for our own inner energy and life force, for the ways we are inseparable from fire, connected to fire, supported by fire. And letting that awareness go. And invite in a sense of resting in connection to our own bodies, to the earth body, and the manifestation of the elements in our bodies.
Yeah. Alright, so what a lovely meditation. Thank you, René. Now that we're in practice together, we're going to take practice a step further into the body. We're going to do a somatic practice. This is a practice that if you are open to doing it standing, it's good to feel the alignment of the spine with the earth, but you can also do it seated or lying down. How's my volume? Good. Is it okay over there? Okay, so I'm going to stand up. Feel free to join me if you feel like sitting. Totally okay. Alright. Just landing again in the body. So this is a way to become multi-dimensional people in our practice. So first we're going to feel for the planes of the body. We're going to feel for the plane of length. So feeling for length is feeling along the center line of the body, almost as if there was a silver string pulling you up from the crown of your head, rooting down, vertebrae by vertebrae stacking towards the ground, feeling towards the earth. And feeling the length of the body, can you lengthen an inch or two more? Can you feel for the dignity of your human experience, the dignity of what you care about, of your commitments? Feeling lengthening in the plane of dignity. And then unfurling out along the shoulder blades, down through the arms, to the hands. Coming into the plane of width, widening along the center line of the body. That's right, widening it maybe an inch or two beyond the edges of the arms or the legs. Allowing yourself to take up space, to be in belonging, to feel for belonging in this collective body, in this room, in our shared commitment to practice, to joy, to healing, to freedom. Widening out into belonging. When you feel for belonging, what part of your body comes online? Widening in the chest or the pelvis or the feet. And what part of yourself might disappear or be blank? It's also very useful information. And the third plane of the body is depth. Feeling for depth is feeling for the rib cage. And lowering down, you feel for your back body. Is there pressure, sensation, or temperature of what's come before you? Those ancestors, the people who made it possible for you to be in practice, to be here tonight, committing to the Dharma. Moving forward from the back body to the front body, a softening in the eyes, the jaw. How are you meeting this present moment? Is there a temperature or sensation at the front of the body? Are you a little bit forward or a little bit back? And centering in those dimensions of length, width, and depth. We're going to move to the center of the body, which is a couple inches below the belly button and a couple inches back. It's sometimes helpful to put a hand a couple inches below the belly button to feel for center. Center is a place of mystery, of the unknown. What are we centered on? What are we committing to? Feeling for what's alive in you. And when you're ready, we're going to bring our attention back to the room and we're going to do a mood check. Richard, could we we start with you. What's your mood?
Calm and compassionate.
Yeah, I'm moving to your left. Gabrielle.
Right. Open and spacious. Mm. Content.
Thank you.
Restless.
Very relaxed and centered.
Serene and at ease. Warm and a little tense.
Curious and energized.
Soft and widening.
Questioning. And tingly. Smiley. Curious. Curious. Whoever from
Oh,
both.
sorry. Centered and peaceful with some rising anxiety. Mellow and happy.
Thanks, Gina. Thanks everyone for this practice. May it be a contribution to your ability to be present, open, and connected.
Thank you. Thank you.
I am delighted. That meditation was glorious. And the somatic sensing was a perfect way of giving some of the depth and the span of what it is that we're going to be talking about. So my objective tonight is to give an outline of the foundations of mindfulness as an overview, and then to move into more depth about the first foundation, the foundation of the body. And so the
Foundation of what?
of body, yeah. And so to have that guided meditation was perfect because it combined a number of elements that are in the mindfulness of body contemplations. So it was wonderful. And then the sensing allows us to begin to feel into some of the ways that we directly experience things, which is not often languaged in that kind of a way in the classical teachings. And yet when we open to it, it gives us another level of depth as well as another level of skill in being able to develop the tools to heal and to come into fullness, to aliveness. So if we step back a couple steps, I mean, this is a group of mostly seasoned meditators, but if we just take a moment and consider, why do we meditate? What's the point? the Buddha's instructions, or the way of doing this, is to move past our confusion, pain, and distress, and to find more ease, joy, and peace. And it's often the case that what's happening is that we're distracted, and with our attention jumping from one thing to the next thing. And then sometimes what happens is that our attention gets focused and fixated, and sometimes it gets focused and fixated on things which might be pleasant, but the pleasure may be short-lived. And sometimes what happens is our attention gets focused and fixated on things that are stressful. Body stresses, relational stresses, societal stresses. And all of this is a source of various different kinds of dukkha. So the Buddha gives a context for the stress. For a lot of what it is that we're experiencing, it can be summarized or boiled down into the push and pull reactivity to what's happening. So aversion is a pushing away. It's like, I don't want it. Get rid of it. Kill it. Annihilate it. Desire pulls, grabs. Ignorance is, I don't want to see. I don't want to know. Just like, let me go back to sleep forever. Get me out of here. And so the essence of the Buddha's teachings illuminates the fundamental misunderstanding, which is that all of this reactivity is happening because of taking ourselves to be solid and separate, and therefore our happiness is dependent on defending ourself and gathering in the things that we think are pleasurable and satisfying. And so, bodies are hugely vulnerable. That's a reality. And so it makes sense that we feel defensive and protective, and it makes sense that we want to have pleasure from the body's perspective. But when we spend time meditating, we can get underneath that as our primary identity, that we are our body as a solid, separate, distinct entity, and that the only thing that we have available to us is to defend, to protect, or to grab. So those things come as a result of identifying with the body as our primary identity. And so when we learn to cultivate sustained attention and change our frames of reference, we can then shift from focusing on unpleasant to neutral or to pleasant, and then from short-lived to more sustaining joy and peace. So I wanted to, one of the things that was interesting to me was that Ajahn Pasano took a group of dedicated practitioners on a trip to Thailand to go visit and hang out with the very highly accomplished meditation practitioners. And they spoke to one forest meditation master who was highly, highly accomplished. And, they were asking him, what's the obstacle? What was the hardest thing for you in your practice? And his response was attachment and identification with my body.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, this is not like small fry. This is like very, very deeply rooted for most of us. It's a big thing to begin to look at this from a different perspective. So in this course, we're interested in seeing the different kinds of joy that comes with our practice. And I have put this thing up, and I'd love to turn this into some kind of a spreadsheet that's crowdsourced that invites everybody else to add things to it, because this is in no way comprehensive. And I would love, as you go through the day, for you to consider the different kinds of joy that you experience yourself, relationally, and from the perspective of society. Both in terms of beginning to notice that there are different kinds of joy that shows up in these different categories, but also to begin to get a sense that some of the joys that we experience are also the remedies for some of the places where we are hurting. And to put that
I
together.
can't quite read that. Could somebody read
So-
the words?
So would you like to read?
Sure.
Yeah.
So the first column is self. I guess joy in self, as it shows up in the self, and that's regulation of the nervous system, respite, which relates to the hindrances, or like respite from the hindrances, recovery, relaxation, rest, relearn, collected/focused, balanced, and resilient. And then relational joy is regulation, that'd be like regulation with another, healthy boundaries, safety, relating to the precepts, repair, mudita, or empathetic joy, sympathetic joy, trust. And then societal joy would be also the precepts, justice, reconciliation, reparation.
Yeah, so I'd love this to get translated into a Google Doc that we can continue to add to and have this as a growing list. Because I think it helps us just to become focused on the ways that we experience joy and to notice the different places that these are showing up. Because it's, you know, the Buddha speaks a lot about the kinds of joys that come in our meditation practice. It's not so often that it's spelled out in terms of relational joy, and it's rare, much rarer that it's spelled out in terms of the societal joy. And yet these things are all connected, you know? They're connected. Yeah, Terrence?
I feel like I'm not quite in the slot, so when you were talking about joy, I was thinking of like compassion, gratitude. So, but this is somewhat on a different track, right? Or would that?
Compassion and gratitude fit in the self joy. I mean, compassion, but that goes across. Yeah. Yeah. So some of them move across, like some of the Brahma Viharas, they move across. They're not just in one category.
I think it might be helpful too to look at it as like our conditioning, right? Like all that activity that leads to the self, all the selfing. It's like these are sites of shaping. This is like where our conditioning gets felt, right? Self, relational, and societal are like these different levels where our conditioning are taking place. So I look at these, and if please Amma, correct me, but it's like this is where the repair happens, right? Where we've been shaped.
No, that's fine. That's right. Because part of what I'd love us to have as we go through this course is an increasing sense of toolkit of where we can focus our attention at the different ways that we are experiencing stress so that we can have more ease and more joy. Yeah.
Yeah, I've also been thinking a lot about the relational, and I think of collective joy is the words that I have been using in talking about it, as opposed to societal.
Yes.
Like, what are the collective joy practices?
Yes.
And I was just thinking actually about like attunement as one that's a relational joy, but it can also be in a collective.
But I guess, but like for me, so like I mentioned on the day long that there were some things about living in the monastery that were unsavory. And so in our meditation practice, the focus is on releasing all of it in oneself. But part of what came is a result of structural and systemic imbalances. And so when you try and resolve dukkha that's coming from structural and systemic imbalances just in your body, there's a limit to how much release you can experience. But when you have congruence, like you've got dukkha that comes from structural and systemic imbalances that are named and seen relationally, and then shift into structural and systemic repair and reparation, that's a different level of joy and resolution. Yeah. So it's actually a very profound conversation, which we don't have time for right now. But that's what I was talking about. These like this, not a big picture, Yeah.
So there can be different degrees, right? Because in a society where the reparation does not take place, that does not mean that you cannot experience a certain level of joy in self. Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the one of the telltale signs of somebody who is a master is that they don't wait for the things external to shift in order for them to come to their own internal peace. So, for example, Nelson Mandela, he was imprisoned for 28 years, and when he was freed, he became the head of the country, and he knew that if he kept bitterness about the 28 years of being imprisoned, that he would still be in prison even though he was no longer there. Yeah.
So is the trick then to attain a certain level of personal joy, even though the external conditions are still not set, but not to become so deeply enmeshed in personal joy that there is no recognition that that external issue needs to be dealt with?
I think that's right. There's a recognition that there's an interdependence as well as an independence, and that these two things are in relationship with each other. Yeah. So, moving on to the Satipatthana Sutta. Now, I recognize in this group, we have a diverse group in terms of people's Dhamma need. Some people love the classical teachings and just want to dive into that. Other people are much more interested in more relational practices. Some people are like really excited by limbic injury. So we've got this spectrum. And what I thought to do with René and Amanda is come up with a reading list that has classical references, relational and somatic references, and more things to read so that you can pick and choose the extracurricular reading you want to do. But in terms of classic, these are two classic books that are awesome. The Majjhima Nikaya is the Middle Lake Discourses that's been translated by Bhikkhu Bodhi and Bhikkhu Nyanamoli, and this is the Satipatthana, the Direct Path to Realization by Venerable Analayo, who this is the result of his PhD thesis. And so I love Bhikkhu Bodhi's translations. I think they're excellent. There's some things that are online that by different translator. But in the sutta, the Satipatthana Sutta, the context is that the monks are sincere. Let me just read the first part of it. So this is Majjhima Nikaya Sutta number 10, the Satipatthana Sutta, the Foundations of Mindfulness. And I'm just going to read the first part, and then just the headlines. Thus have I heard, on one occasion the Blessed One was living in the Keru country at a town of the Kerus named Kamasadama, and he addressed the bhikkhus thus. Bhikkhus, Venerable Sir, they replied. The Blessed One said this, Bhikkhus, this is the direct path for the purification of beings, for the surmounting of sorrow and lamentation, for the disappearance of pain and grief, for the attainment of the true way, for the realization of Nibbana, namely the 4 foundations of mindfulness. And what are the 4? Here, bhikkhus, a bhikkhu abides contemplating the body as a body, ardent, fully aware, and mindful, having put away covetousness and greed for the world. She abides contemplating feelings as feelings, ardent, fully aware, and mindful, having put away covetous and grief for the world. They abide contemplating mind as mind, ardent, fully aware, and mindful, having put away covetous and grief for the world. And he abides contemplating mind objects as mind objects, ardent, fully aware, and mindful, having put away covetous and grief for the world. So then he goes on to speak about the contemplation of the body and all of the different ways in which there is the contemplation of the body. So you can see I took liberties after the first couple of sentences to change the gender, because it can be really impactful when all you hear is languages that exclude you. And when the Buddha was talking about bhikkhus, what he was referring to is a group of people who are ethically committed, diligent, and have a commitment to put the teachings into practice. And so we can have confidence that that is us. We've affirmed the refuges and taken the precepts. We are here with a dedicated commitment, and it's not dependent on our precept level. The 5 precepts is an adequate precept container for practicing this, and there isn't any other category that would exclude us. And so for me, when I read the sutta references, you'll hear me move in and out of he, she, they, and any other kind of whatever, that we can begin to feel that it's about us rather than about a group. There's no bhikkhus that are here in this space, you know? So the sutta begins and ends with the assertion that the Satipatthana is the direct path to Nibbana. It's an unshakable freedom. And it speaks about these 4 references of body, feeling, mind contents, and Dhamma applications to experience, which I've got over here, the foundations of mindfulness. The mental qualities that are needed: diligence, clearly knowing, mindful, and free from desires and discontent. And then the sutta goes through each foundation in detail. Contemplating the body proceeds in this progression from breathing, postures, activities, analysis of the body with respect to the parts, elements, and contemplating corpse and different decays. So I've got the aspects of the actual first foundation of mindfulness written out here. But what is fascinating to me is that the sutta never once mentions relaxation. So it presupposes that people are already relaxed. So let me just see hands up of anyone for whom relaxation might be supported with a little bit more encouragement. You know? So we have to also look. The Buddha was the wisest teacher that I have ever come across with, but it's coming from a bias that is particular to culture. And so there will be times also where I will illuminate the bias. And the bias, one of them that we see, is that there's no mention of relaxation. And for most of us, that is a huge part of what we need to cultivate so that we can have access to the fruits of the teachings. So the first one that they mention is breathing, and one of the things that I love about Venerable Analayo is that he's fluent in the other translations and recognizes that in the Chinese tradition, breathing is listed as the 3rd one after postures and daily life activities. And from the perspective of continuum and flow, it makes more sense that we can have just the knowledge or the awareness of our posture and our daily activities before we move into more of an introspective way of being with our breath. And then the Asubha practices, which are classically looking at the unbeautiful components of the body, that's to balance the bliss that we get from the focus and the concentration that we spread throughout our body, so that we keep that in balance with looking at there isn't particularly anything sexy about a liver or lungs or bone marrow. And so then it contextualizes it. But where we need to be super careful is that we don't use the 32 parts to accentuate any level of self-hatred or body shame or any of that stuff, with many of us have tons of, just tons of that. So that's not helpful. So what I like is to look at it as the as-isness. It's like, one of the ways that the Asuba practices were looked at was like as a bag of beans. Just there's kidney beans and this kind of beans. It's not like they're gross. It's just that it's just like that. Yeah. The elements, which René helped us with, and then death and decomposition. So the value of body awareness is that it helps us. We don't live in the past or the future. The body cannot do that. It's the simplest frame of reference, but it's not easy to have our attention stay there. And it's a place where our physical correlate can be found for feelings, mind contents, and the Dharma. The benefits include, as I mentioned, balancing the bliss of absorption with the isness of reality, balance and centeredness in terms of being upright, restraint of the senses, so it helps us to be able to preserve our own sense of safety in the midst of chaos and danger. It helps us deal with challenges. It is supportive for overcoming thoughts, for developing concentration, and for coming into a right relationship with the whole sense sphere, and especially sensuality. I'm out of time, and I've got a whole bunch more that I want to talk about. What I wanted to say is particularly around relaxation. I wanted to go back into that. There's a person by the name of Will Johnson who comes from the Tibetan tradition and has written a number of different books, who makes the entire practice of relaxing the body as the main object of meditation, to look at the way in which the armoring that we have then influences the amount of thoughts that we have, and then it completely shapes the way we experience life. And so he spends not just a little bit of time talking about posture and balance, but really lets that be a huge part of the practice as a way of giving the tools to get beneath this tension, so that we can see the relationship between the tension that we have and our distractedness and obsession with thinking. And so rather than go into more details with that, I will send an article where he speaks about this very clearly, that's just a couple of pages long, and it has all the names of his books. Yeah, and it's fabulous. It's just fabulous. I love it. So I will close here by saying that we start with the body as the first foundation, and in some ways it's the most important to be grounded in, because it's the place where we can feel and work with the physical correlate of feelings, of mind objects, and of the qualities of the Dharma. So it's something to really come back to and establish. Yes?
I know we don't have much time, but could you say a few words about that thing that you just said, that how the armoring of the body influences our thoughts, influences how we think, what we think. It seems like that's I don't know, it just seems like that's really an interesting area for exploration.
It's a huge area for exploration, and that's one of the reasons why Will Johnson's work is so amazing, because he completely understands that and has a very skilled way of describing how the musculature tension then disables our capacity to sense into, it's like a numbness.
Mm-hmm.
It disables our ability to feel other subtle sensations, and those mask other levels of feelings. And then what happens is, because it's not comfortable to be in our body, then we go into our thinking. And so as sometimes what happens when we meditate is that we feel unpleasant sensations because that armoring starts to melt away, and then some of the memories that the armoring is protecting us from come up, and so then there needs to be skill in navigating all of that, so that there isn't like a deep dive into difficulty, but it's titrated with a measure of kindness and care, and with also attention focused on what is easeful and joyous and loving. And one of the really significant supports for all of that is community, and feeling that people that see you, get you, and have your back. So part of what I intend and hope that the three of us can weave together is where we're moving between these, the self, the relational, and the larger picture, so that we're not feeling like we have to pull it all together with our own bootstraps. Yeah. So I will pause here a few minutes late than I had planned.
And once you're paired up, I'll give you the first question.
Okay.
It's dangerous over here, though. Yeah. We're flaming. Okay.
My chair?
Are you gonna come over with Michael?
Okay.
All right, so introduce yourselves if you don't already. I think you all know each other already. Great. The person who's going to start first is the person who's closest to these windows over here.
That's tricky.
That's tricky for you. And each person will have 3 minutes to share. The person who's sharing, the other person is just listening, and as much as possible not thinking about what they're going to share next. So the first question is, in what way am I grateful to my body for my practice? So just anything you want to share about gratitude to the body for your practice. And I'm going to ring the bell after 3 minutes and let you know to switch, and then ring again. So the question again, in what way am I grateful to my body for my practice? Go. Each 2 minutes this time, just because we're...
Can you repeat it?
Yes. So 2 minutes this time. How do I listen to my body in my practice? Didn't answer. Sorry if I just cut you off in the middle of a thought. That was a little abrupt.
So welcome back to the circle, everyone, and this is a time for share about what came up during that inquiry, as well as more questions about the talk and the things that are up on the walls. So this is open time. Yes, Richard.
Yeah, I had a question about, you said that like nowhere is relaxation mentioned in the Satipatthana, but isn't it like when you're dealing with restlessness and worry, isn't the sort of antidote to that is relaxation, or am I thinking of relaxation differently than you're meaning it?
I think the antidote to restlessness and worry is concentration. That's one of the antidotes to it. But like in the first part, when they say go to a forest and set your body down and set up mindfulness, in that part, there's no mention of spending any time to relax your body. It's just assumed, you know? And I think culturally, like, you know, I haven't lived in Asia 2,500 years ago, but I lived in Asia 30 years ago, or I visited it. And even 30 years ago, you know, it was noticeable that uptight was just not something they did. You know? So,
No,
yeah.
I don't know.
So, and we do that, like we don't know how not to do that. It's just like, you know, it's so deep, you know. So that's one thing that's a cultural bias. Yeah, I think it's a cultural thing.
I just wanted to add, there's something about living in a capitalist society that enhances stress. I mean, I had read something, there's a phenomenal percentage of people who have mental health issues. It's not inherent with with humans, it's just the society that we live under. So I just wanted to toss that in because I think there's a lot of things that it's just unhealthy in terms of the structure of the society in which we live.
That's right. And so when we look at this without taking any of that into account, it's a different picture. It's not that we have to get it all figured out in order for us to experience joy, but when we have that as part of our frame of reference, then that becomes something that we can look to in a larger, like to really get the conditions right so that it maximizes joy. We can't avoid looking at those more difficult global systemic things that we're navigating. Yeah. Yes.
I recently spent 2 days, just 2 days, at Wilbur Hot Springs, and I became an actual different person. Just after 2 days of no driving the car, no access to the phone or the internet, dip in the flume to relax the muscles, and a walk to look at the wild ponies. And I was a different person, and it just like blew me away.
So tell, in what way different?
I was relaxed, and my husband didn't get on my nerves, and I didn't mind actually not having my phone like glued to my hand, and I was able to sit there on that porch, and it was hot, and I just sat there and like looked at the sky. And I was okay with that. I wasn't planning what I had to do next. I wasn't regretting something I said yesterday, or, you know, I wasn't doing all that churning inside. I was just sitting there. It was just a body, you know, in a chair.
So certainly being unplugged from technology helps, and that water is magic.
And that water might be actually magic.
It is. It is magic. And so the combination of magic water, magic place, and no technology and lots of space.
And no driving.
And no driving. It's a really, really good combination. And so like note to self.
Yes.
Yeah. But all of these things that feel so deeply personal, you know? So deeply personal. Really, it's like you just shift the conditions and it's like they kind of fall apart. Yeah. Note to self. Yeah.
Oh, on that same point, whenever I go on retreat, you know, in that first couple of days where you begin to relax, every time I think I'm getting the flu. Because it's such an alien feeling. I mean, it's so foreign to me that, you know, for my body to feel that relaxation. Another question that sort of comes off Terry's earlier with the joy, myself, relational, and society. Did I understand, or did you sort of touch on this? I mean, that self is foundational, and if I can't experience joy in self, is it even possible to experience joy relationally or societally?
It's a good question, and these things are a little bit interrelated, and part of the reason why is because I haven't mentioned the word attachment wounding yet, but attachment wounding and limbic injury are, in my own mind, they are connected, even though I have never read anything that scientifically links them together. But attachment wounding speaks about the kind of experiences that we had as children. So when we're infants, all of our basic needs are taken care of by primary caregivers. And depending on the quality of attunement and care and responsiveness, it forms either healthy bonds, which is a healthy attachment, or unhealthy bonds where there's some kind of a wounding in the way that trust happens. So our first experience is not self, our first experience is relationally. And when that relational experience has got something that's not good enough, then that imprints our capacity to feel joy in ourselves. It imprints our ability to have joy with others, and it completely impacts the way we see and observe what's going on in the society around us. And I'm convinced that it's interwoven with limbic injury, though I have never read anything that puts those two things together. Yeah. So as we grow older, we live in a highly individualistic society that posits all of it in terms of our own self, but our own self is intimately connected with our ability to trust others and to be seen and cared for by others. So there's a dovetailing of that, you know? And when we are coming from not good enough initial bonding, that is a resilient pattern that's difficult but not impossible to shift, and is one of the things that leads to addiction, and is one of the things that leads to various different kinds of coping mechanisms that are less than optimal. So for me, you know, when we're talking about these things, they're all connected. You know, it's like, it isn't helpful for me to speak about the foundations of mindfulness without actually naming these other components, because if what we're wanting is to develop the full awareness of our body, then we have to be present to the reality of our whole experience, and some of it includes what I showed before on that bell curve, which is the stuff on the front end of the bell curve that the Satipatthana Meditation Sutta is not optimally designed to deal with. You know, the Buddha does not speak of attachment wounding. He does not speak of limbic injury. And the meditations that he gives are not optimal for addressing it. In some ways, it's contraindicated. So that's why we need to develop the skill to know where are we at, so that we can be appropriate in the way that we apply the meditation, and also more responsive to each other. You know, we don't. It's not all one size fits all, where we're all in the same. We're all in the same place. You know. Yes, please, Marcy.
Well, I guess when we were sort of answering these questions, what I was reflecting on is how much my body just keeps pointing out over and over again, you know, my desires, my aversions, and my delusion. You know, like my desire to eat more of that pie, you know, my desire to look young and healthy, my aversion to, you know, not having as much energy or losing my memory, right? And in the middle of it, my delusion to think that I'm always going to be the same. And it ain't true. I mean, so I find it fascinating to see how much, even climbing a mountain, which I was doing a couple of Sundays ago, I was like, oh, this is really hard, but I want to do it. But I felt the aversion of carrying this body up a mountainside. And noticing you're choosing to do it, but I could still feel the aversion. And that was, of course, counterbalanced by the joy of being there.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Anyhow,
Yeah.
your own body just teaches you so much. You don't have to look at the world.
That's right. And so from our mind, we don't have a sense of ourselves as aging,
I know.
and yet our body completely ages, and slows down, and all kinds of things shift, and our capacities change. And then, I don't think I'm as old as you are, and I've had huge health things. And so, my health stuff has knocked me out, where it's like, it's not a joke, where there's days I can't get to the mailbox, it's like I cannot get to the mailbox, which in my house is 45 feet away, So it's like, if we have an idea I'm supposed to, or we go into fear, we go in, we can spin.
Yeah.
And none of that actually helps me get well, And so our bodies are big learnings, especially, aging is one big, huge learning. It's not for wimps. It absolutely is not for wimps. But major sickness isn't either,
At any age.
Yeah. Just like, oh, wow. It's, not easy. Yeah. So when I say that my hope is that this is a limbic-informed group studying the foundations of mindfulness, what I'm saying in shorthand is that I want us to understand the Buddha's teachings in a way that gives us the skill to also deal with the whole range of limbic injury, attachment wounding, and the places where our bodies are navigating trauma and PTSD and this kind of freeze, response where we're not fully alive, we're not actually completely here, And so, because first of all, it's something that we experience, and so it's helpful to know that. But also, with the world getting as nutty as it is, it's like more of us are going to have access to those things that before were limited to fewer people. It's going to be much more common. And as a compassionate thing, even if it's not something you have experienced much of, just in terms of developing the resources to be around family members or friends or Sangha members who are, it makes a completely different level of safety when the community kind of gets on board with this is reality for folk and becomes skilled in what are wise and sensitive ways of meeting that, because fundamentally meditation is about meeting what is and responding with wisdom and compassion. And if there's a whole huge part of life we have no clue, it's like, offline. It's like, how do we show up for something that's offline? Well, we need to actually make it online, and see how it's showing up, if there's any truth to that in our own experience, or if it's not something that we know, how do we be there for others for whom it is? What does that look like in a way that actually meets them rather than overrides them? Yes.
I've been to retreats that I missed in the Forest Refuge for years, meeting my trauma history and having no way to cope with it except to hide out in my room and cry a lot. And it just really, that was a very difficult time, spending those years wanting to follow this path and just banging up against trauma every time. And so I've been so grateful to Temple and to you to sort of make it possible to find a way to
And also to normalize it. It's not that there's something wrong with you. It's just that this is actually the territory that you need to have support to navigate. And the classical meditation is not optimal.
And none of the teachers that I had, you know, I would go and try to explain what was going on in 15 minutes. And, you know, they go, sense your breath. I'm like, guys, I'm freaking out here, right? And I can't even like draw, I can't even like breathe. And so it's just, it was very frustrating. And so I'm just so grateful that to have encountered something that allows me to process this stuff.
So I feel sad and glad. You know, I feel sad that you didn't have the support that you needed, and glad that you're finding more support now.
Me too.
I want to add something to that. It just occurred to me that there's been a major shift in how psychologists deal with trauma, like after an earthquake, a fire, your murder. In the old days, at least my understanding of it was to go in and get the person to describe what it was like when they saw that person shot.
Mm.
How did they feel? Where did they experience it? In great detail. Okay? And then subsequently, they found out that in fact that was not always useful. In fact,
Actually, it was
the opposite.
counterproductive, right?
They should have been saying, yes, that did happen. Now, let's talk about how you survived and the people here who are here to support you and what you plan to do going forward in honor of that person or that event. I mean, it was like they took, and I found this curious because I always thought in earlier meditation, we had to sit with the pain and sit with it and sit with it and sit with whatever negative feelings came up. And we're sort of shifting.
That's right. So
Okay.
part of what I would love to have happen is an awareness of when it's useful to stay with what's arising if it's
Yeah.
pain, and when it's not useful.
I would too.
And to be able to shift our attention to things which are joyful and supportive and resourcing and developing more capacity. So if we come out of this course with more skill in that one question, when is it important to sit with our pain, and when is it important not to sit with our pain, I think we've totally aced this course. You know, if we can do that, that'd be great. So on that note, I want to close my part of this discussion and hand over to Amanda for sharing of blessings.
Embodied dedication of the merit. Are you ready?
Awesome.
Okay.
Hang on a second. Let me turn this off and do a new one.
Great. Well, again, seated or standing or lying down. Those famous positions of the body, or we can all get enlightened from. I'm going to do this seated just to bring some more aliveness back into my legs. What a wonderful evening we've had of Dharma together. So this is a practice of appreciation for what we've shared, and a practice of gratitude and extension from the body towards that which is good and to be appreciated. So we're going to start again, coming into our length, our width, and our depth. And we're going to start with an extension from center towards the earth. So allowing your arms to be an extension from the center of your body down towards the earth. For folks whose eyes are closed, you might want to open them for this practice so that we can be a belonging together. And so extending towards the earth, we're going to go around. I'm going to start to my left with Gay. What's something that you're grateful for? And really let your body answer the question from the earth.
My body is grateful that it can hold pain and still grow.
Judy?
I am grateful for the succulent garden that has been planted outside my kitchen window, and I can look out and see those beautiful plants growing there.
Asia?
I'm grateful for this class and for all my friends that support me and I support them. Enjoy.
My body is grateful for my balance.
I'm grateful for being a sentient being and having sense doors so I can live life fully, see life, feel life fully.
My body is grateful simply to be alive.
My body's grateful to the earth for providing a somatic sense of home.
I'm grateful to be here with all of you.
My body is grateful for the solidity of what we stand on. And beyond that, Sangha.
My body is grateful for the bright, cool stillness from the earth for my morning meditation.
My body is grateful for the energy I have to come out at night to these classes.
My body is grateful to the earth for feeding me and giving me medicine and holding me.
My body is grateful for the connection to the earth and for experiencing joy in connection with community.
I'm grateful for the rivers and the streams and all the water that we get to enjoy here these last few days. And then coming into width, which is an extension, it's okay if you touch, but you don't have to, towards our beloved community. What are you grateful for in your belonging?
I'm grateful for the comfort of friends and for a community that listens and shares the concerns and values that I have.
I am grateful for having the opportunity to speak the truth, my truth. Taya?
I pass. I'm grateful for the all.
I am grateful for being accepted and belonging.
I am grateful for Sangha because no one can do it by themselves.
I am grateful for the warmth of community.
I'm grateful for giving and receiving compassion and groundedness.
I'm grateful for feeling seen and heard and being able to see and hear all of you.
I'm grateful for the sense of connection.
I'm grateful for the company of like beings.
I'm grateful for the support of and for each one of you and for ourselves.
I'm grateful for colleagues and collaboration and good listening and good questions.
Grateful for a sense of connection.
I'm grateful for friends and spiritual practice. And then our last round is bringing it in, placing a hand in your belly and a hand in your heart. Allowing gratitude for self. I'm grateful for my love for my playfulness and humor. Something you're grateful for yourself.
I'm also grateful for the ability to appreciate humor and to share humor with other people.
Still crazy after all these years.
Grateful for laughter.
I'm grateful for my body.
I am grateful for trying to be open.
I'm grateful for my moral compass.
I'm grateful for my various inner selves. They can be a handful, but they're worth it.
I'm grateful for my compassion.
I'm grateful for my occasional moments of courage.
I'm grateful for my equanimity.
I'm grateful for being able to continue the Dharma once I first heard of it a long, long time ago.
And I'm grateful for my love of truth.
Grateful for the wisdom of my inner guide.
And here we are, taking this out in all directions, sharing it with all beings without exception. May the goodness we've generated here tonight touch and hold all the worlds. Thanks, everyone.
Very good, very good.
Can I say two things? Can I say two things? I have some handouts if you're interested. I just printed these out. It's called 13 Steps